Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this session. I know it's end of the day, so we'll just kind of get started. What I'll do is, first of all, I'll introduce the fellow panelists. Thanks so much to all these four exceptional leaders for joining in for the session today. Their profiles are big, so I'll do a quick job as far as introducing each one of them. We have Vineet, Aswani, who heads talent for Colt Technology Services. Vineet is an exceptional leader. Prior to Colt, he's worked with organizations like Aegis, also with Genpact. And I must tell you about Vineet that he's very closely connected with the Isha Foundation, works very closely with Sadhguru. So I think the learning we can derive from him is a lot more beyond the topic at hand today. I've had a pleasure of listening to him several times myself. Thank you, Vineet, for logging in.
Thank you, Sumit. Thank you.
We are also fortunate to have Neha with us, who's a Senior Vice President at Airtel and heads talent development and learning culture at Airtel. And you can just imagine how complex that job will be for an organization like Airtel to manage all of that. She's been with the Bharti group for a fairly long time, as previously done corporate HR roles. And, she's also a certified assessor. And, in the last, few months, as I've known her, there's a deep respect that one has developed for her in terms of the thinking that she's doing. She's currently working with Airtel to come out with a One Airtel competency framework, which is an exceptional initiative to combine all Airtel leaders into a common thought process. Thank you, Neha, for logging in today.
Thanks, Sumit. I'm really looking forward to this. And thank you for encouraging me and egging me on to do things like this.
Great. We have also Saurabh Vadva here with us. Saurabh is a very well-known name in the industry. I've known him for almost 15 years now and heard of him first time almost 20 years ago. Currently, he is the EVP and Head of Organizational Learning at Kotak Mahindra Bank. He's a financial services person. He's done senior leadership roles with Bajaj Finserv, with IndusInd prior to this. And at Kotak Mahindra Bank, Saurabh is driving some really large-scale initiatives to build organizational capabilities and within the organization. So thank you, Saurabh, for logging in today.
Thanks, Sumit. Glad to be part of this.
Great. And then we have Aarti with us, who heads talent transformation from SRF. And, Aarti, again, has been with the organization for quite some time. Prior to this, has done senior leadership roles with Apollo Munich, Earth Infrastructures. She's a certified assessor herself. And in SRF, particularly in the last 2 years, she's done an exceptional job in coming out with a great talent development strategy, which cuts across the levels of management for the organization. Thank you, Aarti, for joining for the session. Great. So,
thank you so much, Sumit. Thank you.
Thanks. Great. So, team, we'll get started. And obviously, the topic of the day today is quite critical. And I'll just do a context setting for a minute, and then we'll start off with a panel discussion. I'll stop sharing the screen. It'll be good to look at the panelists together. The context is very simple, that when we look at the effect that the pandemic has had, and even beyond the pandemic, the business environment that we've been all operating as leaders is changing quite a lot, whether it's to do with the economy, the customer trends, or even the talent trends that organizations are grappling with are quite phenomenal. And this is impacting the structure, conduct, and performance of the industry. The business itself is changing. The business model of most organizations are changing. And this is, putting a lot of stress specifically onto the middle managers of the organization. The reason why we call this webinar Strengthening the Vital Link, because at the end of the day, it's this particular group of people, which is the middle management of the firm, which decides whether or not a strategy gets executed. They are the actual link. And unless organizations strengthen this vital link to operate in an environment like this, it becomes very, very tough. Now, the middle managers itself, through a research we are finding out, are facing their own challenges, and I'll not necessarily cover all of this, but they're going through several execution-related challenges with a very high focus on innovation, digitalization. They're going through people-related challenges because the leadership style itself inherently has to change. And they're also going through some personal challenges. And therefore, the role and the job of the middle managers today is much tougher than what it used to be a few years ago. And therefore, we thought it will be good to have a conversation with some of the experts in the field to get their perspectives on how expectations from the middle managers are changing and what can they do about it, what can the organizations do about it. So the way we'll do this is, and I'll stop sharing my screen now. There are a few questions that I have to ask the panelists today, and maybe I'll go into question number one, which I'll like to ask all panelists. I covered a little bit about the background as to why and the business environment changes, but it'll be good to get your perspective on how are expectations from middle managers changing. What is your perspective on what are some of the new things organizations are expecting middle managers to perform? And maybe we can start anywhere. Whoever wants to take the lead, happy with that.
Vineet, go ahead. You unmuted.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to start with the fact that we're listening to this whole universe becoming metaverse in the Star Wars series, or how the technology is upgrading. In the similar fashion, our manager, the middle manager, is expected to be a super manager, in what they're delivering for the organization. In the past, we used to tell them a lot of things that they need to deliver for the organization. And with the pandemic and this crisis being unprecedented, has only added more and more on them. So I think that, first of all, that level of expectation itself is probably unrealistic. And that's where the baselining starts to get impacted and create so many issues around manager capability today. Well, that's a buzzword across every organization, to build manager capability, but we're probably not reflecting enough on what is capacity. Most organizations are telling us that they want our managers to do so many things, but if you ask them what is the percentage time they have baked in the capacity for a manager to deliver those, the answers are really, really telling. So, so that's where I'd like to start with, saying that before we look at manager capability, we have to also look at the capacity that organizations are building in, so that these super leaders or super managers are able to perform and do their bit. So yeah, please, whoever wants to pick it up from here.
Wonderful, wonderful, Vineet. That's a great starting point. Neha, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think for middle managers, right, it's probably a group of people that is expected to do things differently from all aspects. And I was just thinking about the various stakeholders that they have, right? The leaders are expecting them to be more resilient, more adaptive, right? Their teams are expecting them to lead differently, show the purpose of the organization and inspire larger teams, etc. Right? The demographics itself is now ranging from 40-something-year-olds to 20-something-year-olds, right? And the way they need to be led is very, very differently. Externally, the customer is changing. So the last 2 years have obviously had a significant impact in the way the customers have changed, their habits have changed. Effectively, there's no brand loyalty because everybody wants to now experiment and try new things. So externally, that has changed. And then they themselves have to change because they have to upskill themselves. They need to learn new skills. They need to be more digitally savvy. So in that sense, I think this is a group of people that's actually experiencing a change from all aspects and all stakeholders.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Saurabh, Bharti, your thoughts on the...
Yeah. So one of the things I believe in, we are a largely sales population company where large part of the managers are sales managers, actually, who manage frontline teams who drive numbers. Typically, one thing I've observed in pandemic, they feel that they've lost control over people because their connect with the people was far stronger before pandemic because they could meet up in person, spend time with them. During these times, they feel that they've lost control. They feel that they are not as deeply engaged with them. The pandemic has, created a vacuum between the two sets of population. Now, the way they engage with people is one of the most important skill in these times because these are largely remote working teams. The need to have empathy, the need to have connect, or the need to be able to the power of losing control is also that they need to get ready with, because now they can't have interactions throughout the day with them, because they know that everybody is doing so much and experiencing so much multitasking. So these are some of the skills, I believe, which is extremely important for managers at this point of time, is the way they engage in the newer ways. It can't be the same with what they used to, and empathy that they need to bring in is the key at this point of time.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think one of the researchers, global researchers, also found out that one of the critical capabilities is really empathy, organization-wide. Aarti, what would you like to add on this?
Yeah, sure. So see, Sumit, we are typically a manufacturing organization, and we've seen a huge shift in the way, the expectations have changed, and what is expected out of the middle managers now. So earlier, I mean, of course, till before COVID, it was, the middle managers were majorly playing a role of a manager, trying to see how the productivity is going, what is the output, and so the transactional areas were looked at. But with COVID coming in, the human element has really come up very strongly, and that is the expectation now. Like Neha mentioned, there's a huge multi-generational workforce that managers are managing now. So with that, catering to expectations of all the levels is something that the middle managers will really have to work on. Expectations of the seniors, expectations of the people at the bottom, and so that's the kind of synchronization they'll have to bring in.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aarti. And I think it's a very interesting perspective because, maybe I'll summarize this a little bit. So we spoke a little bit about the manager itself becoming a superhero or having superhero related expectations. And then, we spoke about the driver for this is the change and the changing expectations. And both you and Saurabh spoke also about the human element. And, unfortunately, I'm from a Harvard background. So people at business schools or consulting firms, we think in matrices. So if I, just for the rest of the audience, if you imagine a 2x2 matrix in front of us, x-axis is leadership, y-axis is management. So high leadership, low leadership, high management, low management. What is happening is that in the pandemic, management has happened, but leadership has not. And therefore, there's now a lot more demand of leadership, which is trickling down onto the middle managers. Wonderful. So as a follow-up to this context, now a specific question, Neha, to you and to Saurabh. And that is, while there are capabilities that are critical, to Vineet's point earlier, there is also the capacity. And individual capacity sometimes come from the mindset, right? I mean, as a person, I must adopt the right mindset to deal with multiple black swan events that are happening and they'll continue to happen. So what are those 2-3 critical mindsets that you think middle managers today require? What are those 2-3 critical mindsets which are required?
Yeah. So Sumit, I think, and a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today is based on some of the big triggers over the last 24 to 36 months, right? Because there are times in life where things have to change leaps and bounds. And I think that's what's happened in the past few months. And I think one big one which really stands out for me is the ability for people to be resilient in the face of change, right? And very related to that is actually the aspect of being okay with failure, right? Because both these go hand in hand. A lot of people who didn't experience any significant or big challenges probably in all of their professional lives probably experienced it multifold in the last 2 years, right? So I think that one is a really big one, which is how do I sort of bounce back from failure, and also at the same time develop the ability to fail fast so that I can learn and quickly move on, right? And in the digital or the tech age, we call it the age of MVP and pilots, right? And I think it applies also to an individual to say, how do I quickly learn, from my mistakes, fail quickly, and sort of bounce back. So I think that's probably one really big one for me that has stood out in the past few months. And leaders who've been able to do that, organizations that have been able to do that, you can see them coming out much stronger from the pandemic versus some of the others. I think the second big one, and before I pass this on to Saurabh for his thoughts, is being and thinking digital, right? And when I say digital, I don't mean using tools, I don't mean using tech. And this is an area that I've been deeply reading up on for the last couple of months. And, it's this sudden ignition that's come on, which says digital is a way of being, it's a way of thinking, right? The fact that you're constantly thinking about your customer, whether that might be an internal customer, whether that might be an external customer, the fact that the boundaries of age-old structures and the way people operated in standard functions, etc., kind of just vanished overnight over the past few months. The fact that you need to aspects of a digital mindset.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the other really big one for me. And if I had to go away and say I want to invest in my people for a bare minimum of one or two areas in which I would like them to do things differently, probably those would be the two that I pick.
Wonderful. I think great points. And I think before I go to Saurabh on that, just, for the audience who's listening, MVP stands for minimum viable product.
Sorry about that.
Which is really this entire fabulous philosophy that startups created, leveraging design thinking. And it's really that iterative process and mindset that more established organizations are looking at adopting. So, but I think it's two very powerful points around resilience as well as the digital mindset. Saurabh, what would you like to add to that?
So I echo completely on Neha's thoughts about having a digital mindset, and that's the need of the hour, because the current ecosystem that we operate out of, things have been changing so fast that if you really do not adopt to it and fail fast and quickly learn from them, it's always a struggle for them to pick it up and see what needs to be done. But there's one more bit that I want to add from a leadership point now. The need to have a coaching mindset is also very important at this point of time. Why? Because my close proximity that I used to have with people when, before the pandemic was very different. Now that proximity is not there. I have to have in minimum amount of time having a most impactful conversation in the virtual environment. And that's where coaching conversations comes very, very is pivotal at this point of time, to be able to understand. And when I say coaching conversation, I also need to say is that how am I able to spot on the challenges with my people, being able to converse and possibly also help them reflect to find out solutions by themselves is extremely important. Maybe this used to be very different in a physical environment, but in a virtual environment, this has become, pivotal. And these are abilities that's must at this point of time for all middle managers right now.
Absolutely, Saurabh. I think that's a great point. And just to build up on that, what research is also indicating is that in order to lead today in a hybrid environment, and it's hybrid because of multiple perspectives. One is the hybridity that comes in because of who's coming to office and who's working from home, but hybrid also because someone is gig, someone is full-time, someone is part-time. The main issue, or the main capability or the mindset that people also require is this entire aspect of being inclusive, because the hybrid working environment can easily give rise to equity bias going high, proximity bias going high, less of psychological safety. And therefore, this entire, if I'm working with this mindset that you said, which is a coaching mindset, which is this mindset of what can I do to develop each individual, right? As a committed leader, it just helps me to intentionally start including people, because inclusion, unless deliberately done, can lead to unconscious exclusion. So fabulous, great point. Vineet, Aarti, just a bonus question for both of you. You've heard, Neha and Saurabh they spoke about three mindsets, one being resilience, the other being digital, the third being coaching mindset. Anything you'd like to add? Any perspectives you have on the matter?
I'll let Aarti go first. Yeah.
Sure, Sumit. Vineet, thank you. In addition to what Neha and Saurabh just mentioned, I think data, analysis and interpretation is another very important element that the middle managers need to have, because agility, it roots from the requirement to make agile decisions. So now that you have so many statistical tools available, you need to really interpret the data the right way and take quick decisions. So that is another shift I think is required. A data mindset maybe.
Wonderful. I think that's a great point. And I'll talk about that also a little later.
A data mindset maybe.
Yeah. Vineet, what would you like to add?
I'll just probably pick up from what Neha and Saurabh said, and then Aarti added another area dimension to it, which gets me to think, on this famous quotation that says, confidence without clarity is a disaster. And a lot of times we are now noticing that in order to get to a certain position, in order to fast track your careers, especially at the middle management area, people have build enormous confidence, and that's the personality side of it. But unfortunately, the clarity side of it, in terms of the mindset, is still something that one needs to work a little deeply on. And what Neha and Saurabh said also pointed to more fundamentally to self-awareness. Only then you can evolve to a mindset of being resilient, to a mindset of having a coaching mindset. And hence I'd emphasize on this clarity as a mindset and not just confidence, so that we lead and make better and more conscious decisions. I was tempted to use the word systematic, but then I said, no, it's not systematic, it's conscious. And that's what we want people to start thinking differently as we move along in the era and the times that we are in.
Wonderful. Thanks. And I think this clarity, Vineet, that you spoke about, if I've understood it correctly, it's also about being clear about my purpose, right? As a person, what do I want to achieve? The type of life I want to lead. So is it that aspect of clarity as well?
100%, because the first point of clarity will come from not seeing outside, but from seeing within. And the minute you shift the dimension or the paradigm to look within, which is your more inner journey, is when you be able to probably establish and visualize some of these areas very clearly, and hence build a mindset that becomes conscious in every moment. Because times are not going to be easy. Times have not been easy. And nobody needs resilience in the easiest times. People are needing resilience because the times are tough, right? So I think going back to the point of saying, clarity, not just from what we do, but clarity from who we are, what's our purpose, and what do we contribute in the organization, and largely to what we are doing to the human race. Because we may think we are in a certain business. We may be running a telecom business. We may be, having a retail insurance, company. But at the end of the day, if you look at it, right from a manufacturing of a safety pin to an aircraft, every single business is in the business of human well-being. Every single thing that's been designed is towards building human well-being in some way or the other. We may call it business, but the minute we shift this focus from looking at it from business to humans, the way we look at every decision and the way we look at every single individual will transform completely. And that's the clarity that we need from everyone.
Wonderful. That's fabulous point. Thank you so much, everyone. So maybe what I'll do is, before we proceed further, let me just summarize what we've discussed as far as the mindsets is concerned. Also, from our own perspective as Inspire One. And I'll use a slide, to be able to do that. So just pardon as I reshare my screen and I'll stop sharing it. I promise very soon. What we are realizing more and more, just to build up on the points that was mentioned by the panel, that for the managers, the middle managers to become future ready, there are three mindsets or orientations that are becoming very critical. One is this, orientation of hope and positivity, which is really linked to a point that Neha earlier mentioned around, resilience. Because when we look at resilience ourselves, and we worked with Professor Dan Tomasulo from Columbia University on drafting some of this, who's the author of this book called Learned Hopefulness. And what really his research spoke about is that resilience is a lot more easier if I'm hopeful as a person, because resilience is around bouncing back, whereas hope is around bouncing forward. And therefore, how as a middle manager, as I continue to navigate highly uncharted territory into the future, I continue to work with that hope and positive orientation myself and build that optimism culture in the teams that I'm able to lead. The second critical orientation as a leader, which is really around being prepared to thrive on those challenges, breaking shackles from the past, and also just kind of constantly asking yourself a question, which is there a better way of doing this? And our version of digital mindset is there a better way of doing this in a digital manner? Right. So if as a leader, if I start adopting that growth orientation or the growth mindset, it becomes very critical. And to the points that were mentioned, around the coaching side, I alluded to this a little bit, which is how do I have an inclusive orientation, as a leader? Because I don't have, diversity is not a choice. Inclusion is, diversity is there. There's nothing I can do about it. I can decide whether I can be more inclusive or not. And this inclusion is not just about my team, my peers, the partners, external world, that I work with. So I think that was some of our own summary around the learnings, that has come in. I'll stop sharing the slide now. Maybe what we'll do is, before we talk about capabilities, let's see if there's any question from some of the participants. So to the attendees, if there's any questions that you have up till now, this will be a good time to post your questions on the chat screen or the Q&A window. And, we can take some of them. So maybe I can take one that came in the middle while, we were discussing. This question came in from Gayatri. And what she's written is that though new assignment is being provided, and we middle managers are happy to take it, but existing workload needs to be shared by hiring a new resource and some other way, which is not happening. How do I manage this? So, what she's talking about is a very practical challenge here, that, people are expecting me to be superheroes, right? I have so much of work to do, but at the end of the day, I have so much of time, and how do I manage that? So anyone from the panel who would like to, share their perspectives with Gayatri?
I think, Sumit, one aspect is the whole digital mindset piece that we spoke about, right? The whole idea of that is about the what's in it for me. It's about my ability to be more efficient and productive, right? And therefore, within my own sphere of influence, how can I find opportunity areas so that I can create that space for thinking and moving forward? So I think that's probably an area that I would think would be a relevant one. I mean, of course, other than that, these are practical challenges, but that's one thing that strikes me that, and I'll take a small example, right? A lot of us use Microsoft Teams, and just I'm probably one of the early adopters at Airtel. And recently I discovered that I could actually create a workspace within my Teams group to create task lists. And I can't tell you the joy that I have found in that, because otherwise I write notes and I forget where my notes are. And I'm then struggling back finding them, for my meetings. So just that little action of creating that workspace and having my tasks listed out by individuals in my team on that workspace has created so much capacity for me. So, it's just a very real but very small example of
Absolutely.
how I've used
I think
it.
that's a great example. Great example. Thank you, Neha, for sharing that. Let's take one more question and then we'll proceed. Another question is, and it's again a very fair question. The question is, how can middle managers change their mindset when senior leaders are stuck in the old mindset? So, anyone, this is a very tough one. So it's easier for me to just request someone else to answer this question.
So I'll give a perspective of it. Of course, there is no answer to this. When we look at saying others don't change their mindset, so how do I change my mindset? I think mindset is yours. It's not somebody else's. So your mindset is and should not be dependent on somebody else's mindset to shift, right? That will be the worst form of slavery, right? It's like in an organization, somebody tells you that you should only wear things like this, you should do this, you should do that, and if the list goes very, very strong and high, we almost start feeling that this organization is not treating us as employees; they're trying to treat us as slaves. But trying to think that how do I change my mindset because others don't change my mindset is a bigger form of slavery that we don't even want to give that freedom to ourselves. So if we go back to the point that that Neha had started with, which is resilience, I think it'll go and connect it back to that environment, because for you to change your mindset, you also got to have or built-in resilience. If you strongly feel that that's the mindset you would want to operate with, at least within your sphere or circle of influence, then you're not necessarily dependent on the other mindsets around you. For the rest of the other mindsets that don't shift while you've made a shift, there will be challenges. There will be that cloud or the zone where there will be this unrest. We call it political unrest or whichever form of unrest. We got to then deal with that and be accepting of the fact that there is not everybody who's going to be on the same understanding or the same level of mindset. And yet, do what's practical for us, and at the same time, don't limit ourselves to that kind of thinking and to the decision, at least, that we can make in our own areas of influence.
Wonderful.
And on a lighter note, call Sumit to do a webinar for your senior leaders.
Hopefully it'll work. We never really know, right? No, but thank you so much, to both of you for answering these questions. Let's carry on.
I just want to add to it.
Sure.
This is while I completely agree with what Vineet said, but I feel that if you have leaders who have an old mindset, the shift that starts with is by asking the right set of questions. And you would always find an opportunity to ask the right questions, and there are people who will support. The shift doesn't happen that you would feel that, one fine day you get up in the morning and things would have changed and the world would be a better place to be and people will start thinking differently. It doesn't happen. It starts with a question. It's what is the question that you bring it up in a conversation to them, which gets them to think. That's where the shift starts happening. Do you have the ability to ask those questions and, or voice that question at the right place, right time to right people? That's where the shift begins, is my view. And that's how the change happens. Change doesn't happen otherwise, that you feel that they will be changed. It only starts with this.
I think that's
wonderful.
You added a very, very important point. Yeah. So
one point I would like to add here. I think persistence again is a key, game changer here. This is with experience. I can say that when you know that there is something that really works, and if you know that your senior leadership is maybe not buying that point. Again, like Saurabh mentioned, the right forum, the right platform, the right time, and the right question, if asked at the consistently, persistently, I think you definitely see some change happening sometime in future.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Aarti, and everyone for your inputs. So I think carrying on, we've spoken a little bit about the mindsets, and now I think it will also be good to get some perspectives on the capabilities. So we spoke about the three mindset, which is inclusion, growth, hope, and positivity. But middle managers also to become future ready require some critical leadership capabilities. Some of them which we've touched earlier already in the call. But Aarti, back to you. Maybe if you can start with your perspectives on what are those 4 or 5 critical capabilities that you believe a middle manager will have to groom themselves on to become future ready.
Sure. So, I think we've already spoken about a couple of them. Like we spoke about resilience and agility. This is really important because uncertainty is going to be there. Change will keep happening, and the ability to bounce back and, like you said, bounce forward is really required. And it has to be quick. So agility is required, and the data, like I said earlier, also, understanding data, interpreting data the right way, and being a strong decision maker is going to be again a differentiator there. So it is not necessary that you need to have all the answers right in the beginning. It is okay to not have all the answers. It is okay to just have little clarity, but then making the right decision, or deciding in which direction to move, is something that the middle managers will really have to do. So we spoke about agility, resilience, and we spoke about decision making. We spoke about data, and I think the human element, where the middle managers will have to be the mentors and coaches, is something that I feel is going to be very critical, because rest of the job is anyway being done by technology. Everything almost is there. So what is the manager going to bring in on the table? It's the human element. It's the conversation that they will have with their people. How do they groom them? How do they coach them? And make them better leaders. So that's
Wonderful.
what I feel is good.
Great, wonderful. I think these are great points. So we spoke about resilience, agility, data. I completely agree with you. One of the critical areas, decision making, and I think you spoke about mentoring. I think one of the key reasons why organizations today are having such high attrition rates is one of the key drivers is definitely around not having a career path in place. And the middle managers play a critical role in having those mentoring conversations. Unfortunately, most middle managers have been trained on feedback conversations, but not necessarily on career conversations and mentoring conversations. Vineet, would love to get your perspective on this, as well.
Incidentally, internally in the organization, we're trying to look at this aspect a little deeply, and there are 2 prominent areas that we are focusing on. There are many other, areas that managers need to develop in the times, but the 2 that stand out for us right now is extraordinary connections. And when I say connections, it is those human connections and how we deal with them. And the other one is an extraordinary impact. So when we say connections, we are talking about meeting the needs of different generations and the mix that has come together in the times that we are all living in. It's not that the mix has never existed in the past. There has always been a generational mix. Though a little funny that the latest generation calls itself the Generation Z. It's the last word of the alphabet. We shouldn't be seeing this as the last generation. So we should call them A, B, C, Y, Z. But this is the generation that's coming in, and that's the mix coming in. So how do we get that connection right? And very recently, we had invited some of our graduates into a conversation with our executive leadership team. What was interesting to find that some of the things that we think and regard as the prime things for an employee to be connected to the organization, like engagement and conversations, this generation sat on the table and said, we're not interested in it. This generation actually sat and said, as long as you give us meaningful work to do, and we are able to see the impact we are making, this is a well-established connection for us. We don't need to talk to the rest of the people in the company. We don't need to come and sit in this office every day. We're very, very happy where we are. So that just suddenly got us to think very differently. And this is the mix we are handling. Now imagine a middle manager who has say 5, 7 or 10 people. Of course, the ratios are much easier here, and I can probably not think of these ratios with Neha or Saurabh, definitely. Your spans will be much higher. But with that kind of a mix, we are also trying to equip some of our middle managers to not just deal with the other set of people that they work with, but how do they lead and work with this new generation, or the Generation Z. So we're calling them as, how do we train our graduate managers who manage graduates, and how the outputs then starts differing. The other thing I mentioned is on the extraordinary impact. And that's a big area we're trying to look at, because it's not about the routines and times anymore. It's not about you came to office at 9 in the morning, you left office after 7 or 8, and that made sure that you were there and you were doing what was needed. It is now about the impact. Sitting wherever you are sitting, the operating in time zone that you're operating, how do we still continue to make that impact in what we do? And a vital question some of the newer generation is asking, not just about their impact, but also the impact the organization is making to the business, to the society, and to the community as a whole. We were surprised that some of our graduates in Europe sat and asked us, saying, what is the organization's sustainability score? How much are we doing to give back to the environment? And those are reasons for us to continue further in this organization. So that's the mix that we are now dealing with. So I would bring the two areas back again, saying extraordinary connections and extraordinary impact is what we target our middle.
Wonderful points, Vineet. I think extraordinary connect and extraordinary impact. And I think the point that you mentioned on ESG just reminded me of something which I'm digressing for a minute, but I just thought I should share it with the rest of the group. So with a very large FMCG organization, we are currently running a fairly large engagement around innovation, where almost 400 people are going through innovation hackathons. And what we're doing is we're giving people choices on what topic you want to do the innovation hackathon on, and they work in small teams to do that. And one of the areas is ESG. And actually, most people are actually picking up ideas around that. So what we're realizing is naturally, people are a lot more interested to say, what can my organization do on the ESG journey, and what can I do as a manager to support the journey? And all of these 400 leaders are actually middle managers who are coming out with ESG specific ideas by themselves without any nudging that is happening from our side. So I never thought about it from that perspective unless this particular conversation. Great. Saurabh, Neha, anything you'd like to add from your perspective to this question?
Okay. One of the things I feel that the manager journey starts with transitions, and it's still highly underrated. So any capability for that person to, when they transition into our managerial roles, is the shift starts from there. And I always say that it's not something that you suddenly you move into a role and you feel that now you have arrived in life and things are most beautiful for you. The journey starts there, and sometimes it's a journey that takes time. It doesn't happen with 3 days, 5 days, 15 days. It is a hand-holding process that you need to walk them through. So with the current times, not only that there's so many big shifts that is happening around me in my ecosystem. One, my role has changed. The way I need to connect with people because of this pandemic has changed. The focus on the different sets of population, what Vineet spoke of, that I need to handle, that the diversity, the gig workers that I need to manage. I need to be aware of that. This has changed. With my ability to manage myself and team and do so much in a remote and a hybrid environment, and being resilient is most important at that point of time. There's so many things suddenly change, suddenly changes for me, and it starts with that. What is that you need to focus on? So I believe that we've started looking at transition as a big journey for people, which starts the moment that they become a manager or they become a manager of managers, that what is expected of me in all that, and gradually it goes up to 3 to 6 months is what we want to focus on. And there's a shifts that every time that we want to focus on every month, that what we want to address, be it digital, be it the way I look at data differently. And there are a lot of functional shifts at the same time. People only look at behavioral, but there are functional shifts also at the same time that needs to come in. The other thing is that when you become old in the role, how do I excel as a leader in the role is also important, where we focus on 4 different areas. Managers as trainers, because my role is to develop people as well, which is of course, data digital being of course the underlying sometimes across all the programs, and it is irrespective of any managerial role. But managers as trainers, managers as coaches, managers as mentors, and managers as assessors. Now, all these 4 areas is to work with people, how they engage with teams. Where mentoring is required, especially a mentoring is required for a new people that come into the team, because they need to be guided and need to play a role of a mentor and not a coach there. I need to play a role when I see that people are older in the system, they are struggling, and I see them, how do I excel them to a different role? That is where a coaching conversation need to happen. And we clearly make a distinction through that. And as an assessor, how do I spot on where the gaps are? A lot of times there are biases that as a manager I operate out of. How do I get into assessing where the gaps are? And there are tools that we've started created for managers. How do you bring that into conversations with people to understand where the performance or behavioral gaps are, and how do I go about addressing it? So all these things is a part of the journey. Today, if even in my organization expects that, have a program for my managers to do on retention conversations. Now look at it, things have changed suddenly, and with the iteration, they expect that how does a manager does a retention conversation is also very, very important. That's a capability right now that you need to focus on. So, and when I look at a frontline manager and a middle manager and a manager of managers, the capabilities are very different. Let me tell you why. Because a frontline, first line manager needs to be trained to perform certain tasks very well. Maybe those tasks is as simple as how to conduct team meetings virtually, maybe. Now, these are things which are sometimes very underrated, and people say, what are you speaking? But then these are basic tasks that a first line manager needs to be able to perform effectively. And those are capabilities. How do I maybe, how do I onboard a new team member is a capability for a first line manager. How many people actually think on those lines in the current environment, that how do I onboard a new team member? I have a role to play. These are those tasks that this has a high impact. But if I need to build those capabilities, that's what we as an organization like to focus on the first line manager, and then gradually other areas that I just.
Wonderful. Thanks, Saurabh. I think great points, and I'll talk about some of them and summarize. But Neha, over to you to get your perspectives as well.
Within the interest of time, I'll just take 30 seconds. I think in my view, the ability and the capability to ask the right questions and probe, and I think I say this too many times, is highly underrated, right? And if I had to summarize everything that we've been talking about, the ability to display curiosity and thereby build learning agility summarizes everything that we are speaking of, because it's about adapting and learning, right? So I think if there's one capability that one must invest in at all levels of leadership, it's probably that. So that's where I would leave it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks. Thanks to all 4 of you for your perspectives. Maybe what I'll do is, because we have around 6 or 7 minutes, let me summarize this part of the conversation, and then I think it'll be good to see if there are any other questions from the participants. So I think just talking a little bit about the capabilities. Again, we spoke about the 3 orientations, and to build up on the points that we've kind of went through. When we engage with similar organizations such as yours, what we started realizing is that for the middle managers to become future ready, there are these 12 capabilities that are coming across as more and more important. And this is actually more or less a summary of what we've spoken, because we spoke about the 3 orientations, and each of these orientations requires certain specific capabilities. So around hope and positive orientation, we realize that middle managers have to be very good at managing their own emotional well-being and managing burnout, but also leading with hope, energy, resilience, and optimism towards others. To become more inclusive, I need to learn how to lead a remote and a hybrid team, driving performance in team, inspiring engagement, being inclusive, but also cultivate network and partnerships to be able to get all of this done. And growth orientation, really starts, from the bottom with learning agility. Because if I don't have that, if I'm not self-disrupting myself as a leader today, I can't, expect too much. But then how do I use that for executing? But one of the critical points that I like to mention in this chart before we open up for question and answers is customer focus. What we're realizing more and more is that if organizations and the middle managers are not focusing on the customer, they're doing a big disservice, because the main pivot for growth orientation is coming in from the customer. So driving customer obsession and customer focus is the critical organization mandate that we are seeing, but also capability mandate. For the attendees, there's a white paper which is detailing all of this out, which will be sent across to everyone after the session. But I'll stop sharing the screen now. We have 5 minutes left. We are exactly on time, so I think it'll be good to see if there are any more questions. We have 5 minutes, so with the audience, if there are any other questions that you have from the panelists, feel free to ask. There was one question that had come up while we were in the conversation, which was, I'm part of a leadership development journey, but my supervisors tell me that you need to spend after office hours for the same. How can I manage my supervisor's expectations? Aarti, do you want to give it a shot?
I can try, but I think, I mean, maybe the manager is, you are a part of the leadership development journey, right? So I think here, maybe, voicing your opinion is going to be important. Yeah. And ensuring that you don't repeat that with your subordinates is going to be another thing. But self-development, I think self-development continues to be your own agenda if nobody else is taking responsibility of it. So I mean, I think the manager should support, but then if it is not happening, then maybe voice your opinion.
Yes. And I think, unfortunately, these are fairly realistic things that still happen. And, my own perspective on the matter is that to stay on as, as resilient as one can, back to that matrix of Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 that we're all aware of, how do I take out time to invest in my own development is at the end of the day, my area. And, to be able to have those, engaging and tough conversations sometimes with the supervisor to set boundaries is equally critical. Yes, one supervisor will agree, someone will not agree, but at the end of the day, it's their loss if they don't, understand. But as a professional, I should, continue to invest in my development. There's another question that has come up from Nitin. He's written, talent development mostly focuses on high potential. Is it a right strategy?
Look, I think it's a matter of resources versus spends, right? And if you marry that with the science of the Pareto principle, it's the 20% investment that gets you the 80% output. And I think that's the reason why there is this inclination. Having said that, I think most evolved organizations will have a framework of what kind of investments they would make across all parts of the organization and not just for high potentials. You would do something for your high pots, but you will do something else for the rest of the employees as well. So, and this is something that I actually picked up from Mark Efron's one-page talent management, right? Which is, if you're able to actually visualize and put that down on a sheet of paper to say, which are the areas where my employees sit in and what are the kinds of investment I as an organization can make. For example, people like Vineet will have the advantage of global assignments, etc. Whereas people like me may not be as lucky to have had some of those, but there will be some others that we will have as Airtel. And therefore plugging in terms of experiences, rewards, investments in learning and development across all parts of the continuum is what helps in developing a holistic talent development strategy.
Absolutely. And I think one of the critical challenges for the organization, to the point that Saurabh mentioned also earlier, is having that common set of minimum capabilities across levels. And I think directionally, we're seeing more and more organizations focusing on that. I know we have only 1 minute left. Maybe there's another question that came in, and maybe if the panel is okay, I'll quickly answer that, and then we can close. One of the questions, what came in was that as a middle manager, how do we overcome unconscious bias? I think it's a great question, Ravi. I think overcoming biases starts with what you've already done, which is acknowledging that I have bias as a leader. And I think one of the things that I've at least started realizing as a leader myself is that biases exist in all of us. Sometimes we blame other people for having biases, but we ourselves as individuals have so many biases. And the only way inclusion is possible is to become deliberate about it. Frankly, the same is with collaboration. But inclusion, unless I am totally focused on it, does not happen. There is actually a very good HBR article, that I can ask you to read, which is how do inclusive leaders speak? What is inclusive language? It's a fabulous read. So if you want to learn more about this, it'll be good to get your hand around that one. And I think just last point on what Saurabh said earlier, because I think it was a very powerful point on transitions. There's another very good article written by Michael Watkins on 8 seismic shifts that middle managers require to become leaders. So brilliant perspectives, which summarizes some of the conversation. So to some of the audience, when you get time, do a little bit of Google around these couple of articles and you'll see great value. But I think with that, I know we are at the top of the hour. I'd like to thank everyone, all the panelists for our time today. Vineet, Saurabh, Bharti, Neha, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking out time. I've learned a lot. I made copious notes from what we've learned today. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the audience.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.